The private jet's engine whined, a sick metallic scream that cut through the humid air of the tarmac, and Isaac Holloway, a black mechanic in grease-stained coveralls, stepped into the shadow of the stalled aircraft. The CEO's voice, sharp with mockery, sliced through the noise. "Yo, brother, you better fetch me a coffee before you touch my plane." The sun beat down on the private airstrip, turning the asphalt into a shimmering black mirror. Isaac Holloway adjusted his cap, his dark eyes scanning the sleek Gulfstream G650, its silver hull glinting like a trophy. The jet was Mitch Redford's pride, a $70 million symbol of Redford Aerospace's dominance. But today, it was grounded, its left engine coughing smoke, stranding the billionaire owner and his entourage. Isaac, toolbox slung over his shoulder, approached the aircraft, his boots sticking slightly to the heat-softened tarmac. He was lean, mid-30s, with a quiet intensity that went unnoticed by the suits clustered near the jet's stairs. Gordon Blake, the CEO, stood at the center of the group, his tailored suit crisp despite the Florida heat. His blonde hair was slicked back, his smirk as polished as his cufflinks. "Hey, mechanic," he called, barely glancing at Isaac. "Don't waste my time. I've got a board meeting in New York in 3 hours." The other executives, 3 men and a woman, all in designer sunglasses, chuckled, their laughter a chorus of privilege. Isaac's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his fingers already tapping on the tablet he pulled from his toolbox. "Engine's overheating," Isaac said, his voice low, steady, with a faint southern drawl. "Could be the fuel pump or a sensor glitch." "I'll check," Gordon snorted, turning to his CFO, a wiry man named Paul. "This guy's gonna fix a jet with an iPad? What's next? He's gonna Google it?" More laughter, sharp and careless, echoed across the tarmac. Isaac's hands stilled for a moment, his eyes flicking to Gordon. The CEO didn't notice, too busy scrolling his phone, but the woman executive, Claire, caught Isaac's gaze. Her brow furrowed, a flicker of unease crossing her face before she looked away. Isaac climbed into the engine compartment, his movements precise, practiced. The heat from the malfunctioning engine was stifling, but he didn't flinch. His tablet screen glowed with diagnostic data, streams of code and schematics that he navigated with ease. He'd seen worse, military choppers in Iraq, patched together under gunfire. This was child's play. But Gordon's voice followed him, dripping with condescension. "Hurry up, brother. I don't pay you to stand around looking smart." Isaac's fingers paused. "Brother?" The word stung, not because it was new. He'd heard it before, thrown around by men like Gordon, but because it was so casual, so dismissive. He was invisible to them, just a pair of hands in a jumpsuit. He swallowed the burn in his chest, focusing on the tablet. The diagnostics confirmed a faulty pressure sensor in the fuel line. He could replace it, but he didn't need to. A bypass command would stabilize the system long enough for a proper fix later. He tapped out the code, his fingers flying, rewriting the engine's control parameters in under a minute. The engine's whine softened, then steadied into a low hum. Isaac climbed down, wiping his hands on his coveralls. "It's fixed," he said, his voice flat. "You're good to go." Gordon raised an eyebrow, skeptical. 6 minutes? You sure you didn't just kick it?" The executives laughed again, but Claire's smile was tight, her eyes lingering on Isaac's tablet. "Test it," Isaac said, meeting Gordon's gaze for the first time. There was no challenge in his tone, just certainty. Gordon hesitated, then nodded to the pilot, who climbed into the cockpit. The engines roared to life, smooth and steady. The suits clapped, impressed, but Gordon's smirk didn't falter. "Lucky break," he said, turning to board the jet. "Next time, bring me that coffee first." Isaac's hand slipped into his pocket, closing around a sealed envelope. He stepped forward, his boots scuffing the tarmac. "Mr. Blake," he said, his voice cutting through the engine's hum. Gordon turned, annoyed. Isaac held out the envelope. "This is for you." Gordon snatched it, tearing it open. His smirk faded as he read, his face paling. "What the hell is this?" he snapped, holding up the letter. The words, "Termination of employment," were bold at the top, signed by the board of Redford Aerospace. The other executives froze, their chatter dying. Isaac's expression didn't change. "I'm not just a mechanic," he said, his voice calm but heavy with weight. "I'm the auditor sent by Mr. Redford to evaluate your leadership. You failed." The tarmac seemed to tilt beneath Gordon's feet. Claire gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Isaac turned, walking back toward the hangar, leaving the CEO clutching the letter, his empire crumbling under the weight of a man he'd dismissed as nothing. Isaac sat in the hangar's break room, the envelope's twin resting on the chipped formica table. The space was cramped, smelling of oil and stale coffee, a stark contrast to the gleaming boardrooms of Redford Aerospace. His tablet lay beside him, its screen still glowing with the jet's diagnostics. He'd fixed it in 6 minutes, but that was the easy part. The real work had been months in the making: covert interviews, emails, surveillance. Mitch Redford, the company's elusive owner, had hired him personally after whispers of discrimination and mismanagement reached his ears. Isaac, an MIT grad with a decade in aerospace engineering, was the perfect shadow, unassuming, underestimated, invisible. He'd taken the mechanic role 3 months ago, trading his tailored suits for coveralls, his corner office for a locker. He'd seen it all: Gordon's tirades, his favoritism, his casual cruelty toward anyone he deemed beneath him. The CEO's mockery on the tarmac was just the latest in a long line of slights. Isaac had documented everyone, his reports to Redford meticulous, damning. But it wasn't just Gordon. The company's culture was rotten, a machine that chewed up talent and spit out resentment. Black engineers passed over for promotions, women sidelined, junior staff berated for speaking up. Isaac had seen it, felt it, lived it. His phone buzzed, a text from Redford. "Report received. Board meeting tomorrow. Be there." Isaac exhaled, his fingers tracing the edge of the envelope. He'd known this day was coming, but the weight of it still pressed on him. He wasn't just dismantling Gordon's career, he was exposing a system that had let men like him thrive. And he knew the cost. He'd seen it in the faces of his old colleagues at MIT, the ones who'd called him too smart for his own good when he spoke up about bias. He'd felt it in Iraq, fixing helicopters while officers questioned his credentials. He'd carried it his whole life, a black man in rooms where he was never meant to belong. Back at the airstrip, Gordon's voice had carried over the tarmac again, this time laced with panic. "You can't do this," he'd shouted, chasing Isaac toward the hangar. "You think some nobody mechanic can take me down?" Isaac had turned, his eyes steady. "I'm not a nobody," he'd said. "And you're not untouchable." He'd walked away, leaving Gordon sputtering, the other executives scrambling to distance themselves. Claire had lingered, her face pale, her voice low as she caught up to him. "Is it true?" she'd asked. "You're with Redford?" Isaac had nodded, his expression unreadable. "Tell the board to check their inboxes. They'll have my report by morning." Now, in the break room, he opened his tablet, pulling up the report. Pages of evidence, recorded conversations, emails, performance reviews, skewed by bias. Gordon's termination was just the start. Isaac had flagged 3 other executives, including Paul, the CFO, who'd laughed loudest on the tarmac. But the real fight was bigger: restructuring the company, rooting out the rot. Redford had promised him a seat at the table, but Isaac knew promises were cheap. He'd have to fight for every inch. The hangar door creaked open, and a junior engineer, a young black woman named Tasha, poked her head in. "Isaac, you okay? Heard what happened out there." Her voice was cautious, but her eyes were bright with curiosity. He nodded, offering a small smile. "Just doing my job." She hesitated, then stepped inside. "They're saying you're some kind of spy. That true?" "Not a spy," he said, closing his tablet. "Just someone who sees what others don't." Tasha's lips twitched, a spark of admiration in her gaze. "Well, you shook things up. Gordon's losing it, screaming about lawsuits." "Let him scream," Isaac said, his voice calm but firm. "He's done." The next morning, Isaac walked into Redford Aerospace's headquarters, a glass tower that gleamed like the jet he'd fixed. He wore a suit now, charcoal gray, tailored to his lean frame. The security guard did a double take, then waved him through. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt like an ascent into enemy territory. He could still hear Gordon's voice. "Fetch me a coffee, brother," and the laughter that followed. His hands clenched, then relaxed. He'd been underestimated before. It was his advantage. The boardroom was a cathedral of power: mahogany table, leather chairs, a view of the Atlantic. The board members, 10 men and women, mostly white, mostly older, sat stiffly, their faces a mix of shock and suspicion. Mitch Redford, a wiry man with graying hair and sharp eyes, stood at the head of the table. Gordon was there too, his face red, his tie askew. "This is a witch hunt," he shouted as Isaac entered. "This Mechanic has no authority. Redford raised a hand, silencing him. Mr. Holloway has my full authority, he said, his voice like gravel. His report is thorough and damning. Isaac set his tablet on the table, pulling up the evidence. Screenshots of Gordon's emails, belittling minority staff. Recordings of his rants, mocking engineers like Tasha for not knowing their place. Performance reviews that penalize talent for no reason other than bias. The board shifted uncomfortably, their eyes avoiding Isaac's. Redford Aerospace has a problem, Isaac said, his voice steady, resonant. It's not just Gordon. It's a culture that lets men like him thrive while others are crushed. I've seen it, on the tarmac, in the hangars, in the numbers. You've lost talent, loyalty, and trust, and you'll lose more if you don't act. Gordon slammed his hand on the table. You're nobody. You think you can waltz in here and… Enough, Redford cut in. He turned to Isaac, a flicker of respect in his eyes. Mr. Holloway, what do you recommend? Isaac didn't hesitate. Fire the executives named in my report. Restructure hiring and promotions to prioritize merit, not connections, and appoint an oversight committee led by employees, not suits, to ensure it sticks. The room was silent, the weight of his words settling like dust. Claire, the executive from the tarmac, spoke up, her voice shaky. I didn't know it was this bad. I should have spoken up. You can now, Isaac said, his gaze steady. Redford nodded. Effective immediately, Mr. Blake and the named executives are terminated. Mr. Holloway, you'll lead the transition team. Full authority. Gordon's face crumpled, his voice a whisper. You can't, but he was already fading, a shadow of the man who'd mocked Isaac on the tarmac. Isaac stepped out of the boardroom, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. He'd won, but it wasn't over. The system was cracked, not broken. He thought of Tasha, of the engineers still in the hangars, their talents buried under men like Gordon. He'd fight for them, one battle at a time. As he stepped into the elevator, his phone buzzed. A text from Tasha. Heard you took down the king. What's next? Isaac smiled, typing back. We build something better. The doors closed, and for the first time in years he felt free, not just to fix but to create.